Thank you, thank you. So good to see you all. Hello. Welcome to class number 3. I can't believe we're already 3 weeks in. For those of you who have joined us for the past, maybe last class or first class or both, welcome back. Thank you for coming to all 3 classes. For those of you that are new to this class, welcome. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch the replay videos, catch up, and join us today. It is a pleasure. We're just happy you're here. Any of you, all of you, welcome. It is so fun to see where everybody's from. Someone asked where the replay of class number 2 is. You can find that michaels.com/classes, which is a really good segue. You can watch both the first week and second week class on michaels.com/classes. First week, we went over kind of what cross stitching is, how to do it, what materials you need and why. It's really, really good for brand new stitchers. We had a bunch of people who are brand new. So we wanted to start with the very basics, get everybody on the same page, and then jump into cross stitching. Then in the second week, we did even more cross stitching. We did some straight stitching. And this week, we're going to do more straight stitching. We're going to jump into French knots, which I know a lot of you are interested in, and it'll be really, really fun. And if you have to leave early, or if you're watching this from the future, hello from the future, this video will be available, as Felicia said, within 24 to 48 hours, michaels.com/classes. If you need the pattern or supply list that we're working with today, if you haven't joined us in the previous classes, you can go to stitchpeople.com/Michaels, and you can get the pattern and supply list there.
I also put links in the chat.
Spencer's also putting links in the chat. My hubby Spencer is here. He's helping me moderate comments. Here he is.
Hello, everybody.
Creeping up in the shadows. So if you leave questions in the chat, I'm going to be stitching and teaching and trying to make eye contact here in the camera. So if there are questions in the chat that I can answer while we're going along, he's going to feed those to me. You might hear him pop in here and there with those. I've done a couple bonus videos as well. So we've got, because this pattern is a little bit bigger than we can tackle in real time in just these 4 classes, I've done some bonus stitch along videos. You can find those on Stitch People's YouTube channel. So you can watch the official class 1 and 2 on Michael's YouTube channel. And if you go to the Stitch People YouTube channels, that's youtube.com/stitchpeople, you can watch a little bonus stitch along video. That's kind of the homework from week 1, homework from week 2, and then we'll do another one this week. And I don't know if we'll need one the final week or if we'll be able to finish in class. That would be fun. I just want to say congrats to some of you who have been working along the way. I've seen a couple even finished portraits of Sherlock and Watson all done, posted online. Thank you so much for posting those. It is thrilling to see them. So if you're working along, post your progress. Let us see what you've done. If you use the hashtag, hashtag Stitch People, hashtag DMC, and hashtag Make It With Michaels, we'll be able to find you and comment. We'd love to see what you're up to, especially in regards to this pattern, because it's fun to see everybody working in real time all along together. And then if you haven't registered for next week's class, please do so. Stitchpeople.com/week4, that's WEEK, the number 4, will take you where you need to go to register for next week so that we can finish up all together, talk about lazy daisies and final touches and things that you can do to make your portrait even more special and personalized. I think that is it for our kind of housekeeping. I'm just going to jump right into stitching. Let me switch my view here so that you can see what I'm working on. So this is our Sherlock and Watson pattern at 221B Baker Street. This is how far we've gotten according to class 1 and class 2 and our little stitch alongs in between. What we're going to do today is tackle Sherlock and some of the special things going on with him. Now, his outfit, meaning his suit, vest, and shirt, or cravat, or whatever you want to call this, this is pretty much the same as we did with John Watson last week. So what I'm going to do today is focus on stitching Sherlock's skin tone and his hair. Then I'm going to I'm going to do his pipe so we can for sure hit French knots. And if we have the time, we'll bust out his hat and talk about how to tackle that plaid. Homework will be the lamps, and I'll show you some fun straight stitch techniques for making the flames a little bit more flame-like. So we'll do the lamps, and then next week we'll tackle kind of the details of the lettering in the window, the straight stitch arch, and the lazy daisy greenery out front. So without further ado, let me jump into Sherlock. So where do we start on him? You can, again, counted cross stitch, you're translating the grid pattern onto the grid AIDA fabric. So what I like to do is look for landmarks in the pattern that are easy to count from. So you could count from, say, the base of the door, kind of all the way up and over. Again, I'm going to skip his suit for today because we really covered mostly the exact same techniques with Watson last week. So I'm just going to jump right into Sherlock's skin tone. And right here is kind of a landmark, this gold stitch right in the middle of the door. I see Sherlock's ear starts right there. His chin starts right next to it. So I am going to translate this pattern directly onto my fabric by starting the stitch just one over and one down from my lock there, or the hinge rather, the hinge on the door. And I'm just going to jump right in. So to cast on or to start stitching without any knots, you thread your needle and you bring your floss through your fabric and leave a tail on the back side. Hold that tail with your finger.
Adjust the camera here. Sorry, everybody.
And I'm going to make my first diagonal for my first cross stitch. Make sure not to pull too hard so you don't pull that tail through. And for those of you who've watched the past couple classes, I tend to stitch primarily in rows as opposed to each individual cross stitch at a time. It's not right or wrong. It's totally up to personal preference. But as I create this first stitch, it creates a loop on the back of my fabric, and I just loop that tail right down, and then I don't have to create any knots, which would add a little bit of bulk, especially if I were to frame this later. I don't want any knots to pull through the holes in the AIDA fabric. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm catching this tail as I continue to stitch.
Quick question.
I'll unmute myself so people can actually hear me. Someone asked, did you cover satin stitches in the bonus video?
I did not. We're going to talk a little bit about satin stitches today in relation to Sherlock's hair. I did go a little bit off book, as the actors say, and I did a little. I guess technically I did a little bit of satin stitching on Watson's mustache. However, I'll hold this up close to the camera so that you can see. Will it focus automatically?
Well, once I turn on autofocus.
Dum, 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 dum. So for the mustache, in the pattern, it just looks like 2 cross stitches. And if you do 2 cross stitches, that would be just fine. I went ahead and did just a bunch of straight stitches in the direction that the mustache would lay naturally on a human face. So the sides kind of go down into the sides on diagonals. And as I get to the center, it just goes more straight down. So technically, that's a bit of satin stitch, though I called them kind of straight stitches in the video. But we'll talk about satin stitches for sure next week in relation to the flames on the lanterns or lamps, just as an extra stitch to learn. We'll definitely do that. So that's a great question. Okay, so I need 8 stitches across. I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, perfect. And then you'll notice I started with the second row of his face. That is just to show you how easy it is if you use kind of a landmark. Like I did with this hinge, I just went 1 square over and started stitching. So now I'm going to go down and do the chin row and complete it. And then I'll complete my second row because I just want to utilize my floss as best I can. It's such tiny spaces that had I finished this row and then gone down and done the chin row and then gone back up and skipped a row, I mean, that would have been fine too. So there, again, with cross stitching, do what feels logical to you is kind of the best advice I can give as far as how to tackle rows and columns is concerned. Now I just felt on the back side, I've got a little snag. Sometimes these loops happen. They look and feel like knots. Don't freak out. It's just the length of floss sort of twisting and looping around itself. And if you just give it a nice patient tug, you can figure out where it's looped and unloop it. You don't have to slice it off and start over. So perfect. So there's that chin. We'll go back and finish that off. And I'll just review a couple of my like number 1 tips for cross stitching that will help your work look like $1 million, or at least, you know, a well-seasoned stitcher. The first tip I have, as you can see, each cross stitch is made up of 2 diagonals, and inevitably one diagonal will be under another diagonal, which will be over the first diagonal. And you just want to make sure with every single cross stitch that you do that all of your under diagonals go the same direction and all of your over diagonals go the same direction. That'll make sure, or that will ensure that all of your cross stitches have a nice uniform look to them. The second tip I have, as you can see, I am not flipping my work. So I could flip like this and figure out, you know, which hole I need to bring this through on this side and pull it up. Okay, I could do that. It's going to be very time consuming if you stitch that way. So if you're a new stitcher, really, really try to force yourself to develop the hand-eye coordination to do as I'm doing here and keep your work facing forward. It's going to save you a lot of time in the long run, and it's going to prevent mistakes. It's going to prevent snags in your floss. So that would be my second tip for cross stitchy success. Ding a ding ding. My third tip for stitchy success is tension. So especially when you're a new stitcher, it's really, really tempting to yank your floss through from side to side, front to back. Really just make sure it's tight. You don't want to do that too much. You don't want to pull really, really tight. You don't want to give it a yoink. You just want to make sure it's secure enough to, oh, I got to follow my pattern. That is not a full cross stitch. So let me finish my thought and then I'll tell you what I just did. I just retraced my steps there with my floss. So yeah, you just want to keep your tension calm and taut, but not pulling tight. You don't want to distort the holes of the AIDA fabric. That'll make sure all of your stitches lay uniformly on the fabric. So taking a look at our pattern, I've got little sideburns going on for Mr. Holmes. So what I'm going to do, what we did with John Watson, we had some of this happening for his ears and sideburns, but also for the top, for the brim of his cap. Right here, we noticed last week that we could do these stitches either horizontal straight stitches that share the square or squatty little cross stitches. And I'm going to do that exact same thing just vertically for these 2 skin tone stitches on either side of the sideburns. So I'll just draw what I mean. So I'm going to make a cross stitch, but it's going to be kind of long like this. It will take up half the vertical or half the space vertically of the square in the AIDA fabric. I'm just going to poke my needle right outside the holes of the fabric to do that, in between. So following the pattern here, poke my hole right between the hole, or poke my needle right between the holes of the AIDA fabric, bring that up and create a long, tall cross stitch.
Zoom in nice and close.
And then I poke my needle through the holes of the AIDA fabric. I want to try and center it as much as I can. And you can kind of center it in the weave of the AIDA fabric, you'll see as you play with that. And then utilize, there we go, the corner hole of the AIDA fabric. So now I'm going to work my way across. And I will do the same thing on the other side. So for those of you who haven't watched or caught up on weeks 1 and 2, I learned to cross stitch when I was young, but I am self-taught. So I always do feel, I'm self-refreshed rather. When I started cross stitching again, kind of in my 20s, I just figured it out and did what works for me, especially as far as pattern design goes. So I use a lot of little stitches that probably don't really exist, like this half stitch. So again, I'm going to utilize one side of the holes of the AIDA fabric and then push my needle down right in between to create this tall, skinny half cross stitch, half size, half width. There we go. So that's why I use some unusual stitches. And I say the point of a hobby like cross stitching is for it to bring you joy and for it to fulfill you in whatever way that means to you. If that means you really need to stick to super traditional cross stitching rules and stitches, then by all means do that. For me, it involves thinking outside the box a little bit. So that's why some of my designs use unusual stitches and go outside the lines a little bit. It's more fun that way.
While you're stitching, we had a great question from Susan asking for people who have a hard time maybe seeing holes in the fabric or stitching at night, what would you recommend?
Those are excellent questions, and you are lucky. Michaels has solutions for all of them. So there are magnifying glasses, but they're kind of like big lenses, and they can clip onto. Some can clip on your clothes. Some are part of an embroidery frame that you can buy, or they can clamp onto the edge of a table and come up and over your workspace. And it acts like a magnifying glass, but it's big. It's not just like a little detective magnifying glass. It's more like more like a big lens, and it will magnify your whole hoop, all of your work. That'll make it bigger. There's also, I'm not endorsed by this company. I just have one and I really like it. There's a company called OttLight, OTT, OttLight, and they make really great crafting lamps and lights. So they have lamps, some that are like, a floor lamp that sits next to your chair, or a desk lamp that can sit on a table. They also have, what I really like, they have these little foldy lights. And I actually like to it's got a clip on it, and I'll clip it to my shirt and then open the folded light. And so as I stitch with my work like this, it'll just shine right down. And that really helps. It's a daylight light. So that is not only good for shining light on your work in the dark, really brightly so that you can see well, but it also ensures at night when you've lit up your house with artificial light, a lot of people have LED bulbs or incandescent bulbs that shine a certain hue, a certain color of light. I really like warm light, so our bulbs tend to be a little more yellow. Some people have bluer lights. What the OttLight does at night is not only make it easier to see your work, but it ensures that you're getting kind of a daylight look on your work, so that the light that shines on your work from the sunshine during the day through your window is going to be same as that light. And so picking out your floss colors and seeing the color differences is going to be a lot more consistent. So those are some solutions for that.
And OTT lights, again, that's OTT lights. Those are available at michaels.com. So be sure to check those out. I know they have some options that are only available online. They have some that are in store, but that's definitely the first place to look.
Yeah. And if you're not sure if it'll help or not, I definitely recommend one of the smaller ones. I think those little clippy-on ones are like maybe $15 or $20, and they're just real bright. You can clip them on your shirt and it'll shine right onto your work as you're sitting in your favorite chair or whatever, and you'll get a sense for if you think it would be helpful or not. Then if you do think it's helpful, you can, if you want it to be a more permanent thing in your craft space or your living room or what have you, you can buy a bigger, more expensive model.
Felicia has done incredible work, and she's put a couple of links in the chat.
Hey, perfect. Thanks, Felicia.
Yeah, check out those links that she's got there.
There you go. So I'm almost done with Sherlock's face. And I'm going to add a fourth pro tip for making sure your work looks really profesh, because that's what we're all going for, right? Professional stitchers. As you're stitching, clearly many cross stitches will share the same hole in the AIDA fabric. If you've got full things like the full swaths of cross stitching, like the door or like this area of the face, you'll have as many as 4 different stitches sharing the same holes of the AIDA fabric. So what you want to keep in mind as far as that is concerned is making sure your needle really smoothly goes into the hole of the AIDA fabric next to any existing floss that's already in that particular hole of the fabric. So for example, right here, this stitch already uses this hole. So rather than poking through the floss, through the threads of the AIDA fabric, I can kind of use the tip of my needle and swipe those floss threads aside and make sure that my needle is going straight through the hole, sharing the space instead of like sharing threads. Everything can just sort of squish in there, sit nice and tight together, and that'll help make sure things look consistent. So we've got little ears. We've got, I'm going to look closely here. Okay, perfect. So to end our floss, I like to pull my needle through some of the stitching on the back side that just sort of happens as you stitch. And then when that tail is down, you can cut it real close and it's just super, super duper clean. This is why I don't like knots. This one I could probably cut. I mean, I can make these really short and have a pretty clean back. Note about that. Sometimes there's an old adage that the back side of your embroidery or cross stitch should be as beautiful as the front. I believe the front should be the most beautiful no matter what. And if the back looks bad or crappy or sloppy, it doesn't matter if the front looks good. So take your pressure off yourself. What that adage is about is to say, the more consistent you are with your cross stitches using some of the tips that I've mentioned, maybe going in rows consistently, logically moving from one row to another, keeping your tension good, keeping all of your diagonals consistent. What that results in is a clean back like this, where you can see that I've sort of systematized a lot of my stitches. So the back side looks fairly clean. That's all that's in reference to. So just if you've ever heard that, that's what that's about. So what I'm going to do now is I'll show you how to do the mouths for those of you. I think I kind of skimmed over it in the Watson. So I've got 3 threads of 3712. I'm just going to thread that real quick in my needle. I do kind of lick the ends a little bit of my floss. There's wax you can get for this purpose that will have less wear and tear on your needles, but I've never really had a problem. So with the lips, with the mouth, what I like to do is just bring my needle up where the mouth begins and hold the tail on the back because I don't have a knot. And I just do 2 straight stitches across the bottom. And then I have a quarter stitch, a quarter diagonal stitch to create just a little bit of a smile. And I see where my needle needs to go there, but I want to catch the tail so that the tail stays down. Yes, sir. Okay, so there's 1 straight stitch. There's 2 straight stitches. Uh-oh, get my fabric down there. There we go. And a quarter stitch is typically a diagonal stitch from any corner of a square of AIDA fabric into the center. So in this case, I'm just going to bring my needle up right through the center hole. I'm sorry, right through the center portion of that square, right up through the center. This is why I like to use a pointed embroidery needle, because sometimes you do need to go outside the holes of the fabric. And then I go right back down to create that diagonal quarter stitch. And it gives him just a little bit of a smile. And then I run my needle through the back side of the fabric, and I can clip these tails off now that they are nice and secure. And that is just how to do the little mouth.
Now, I want to preempt a question.
Yes.
Now that red floss is like the lip color floss is now mixed in with some of that other floss since you came up and through. Is that a problem?
Oh, that's a good question. In this case, it's not a problem because it's what we had to do to get this quarter stitch. So this is a good example of, we did talk about this in I think the first and second class. It's come up a few times. As you look at a pattern and decide what to do when, you do want to think of what I like to call layers. So for example, these bushes very clearly go in, they sit in front of the door. So it makes sense to stitch the door and the stairs and then do the bushes on top so that we don't have to try and like stitch around the bushes to get all those cross stitches of the door in there. Similarly, the lips sort of sit on top of our skin, on, you know, in the front of our face. So it makes sense to complete the skin tone first and then add the mouth on so that nothing gets covered up or lost in translation. So that's a good argument for just thinking through the process, the chronology of how to tackle your portrait.
Have you done Sherlock's ears yet?
I did do Sherlock's ear. No, I didn't do Sherlock's ears. I did his sideburns. Thank you. Someone caught that, didn't they? So I'm going to refloss with the rest of this 945. I totally forgot to do the half stitches that are the ears. So let me quickly, the first one's going to be on the same row as the eyes. So I'm going to bring that up, leave a tail. I would have been so sad to get there and see that I had forgotten. And these are those tall, skinny half stitches like we did, because we just sort of want the idea of an ear there, just enough width to allude to it. So I've got a loop forming on the back, and I'm going to pull the tail through that loop to secure it. No knots necessary.
And then while you're doing that,
Lips before mustache, as far as layers go.
Lips, that's a good question. For Watson, I generally kind of do lips last because, well, unless you want to do it, that I guess is really up to personal preference. I did the lips after the mustache so that they stand out a little bit. However, you might have someone in your family or, you know, whatever, who's got one of those big mustaches that comes down over the lips. And if you'd rather do the lips and then have some of the hairs kind of come down and over the lips, I don't see why not. So because I forgot to do the ears in the same line as doing the rest of the rows of the face, I finished the ears on the right side, and I'm just going to, just so that I don't have any slack or like weirdness happening, I'm just going to run my needle through the stitching on the back. Pull that through. Oh dear, I put on lotion before I began. This is...
You need help pull.
There we go. So there, I'm going to just pull that through. I'll clip these tails so they don't get caught. That one got a little funky. And this is just to keep, because I need more flesh toned color on this side. I just didn't want, like over here, I have these big loose strands. I didn't want that. So I just ran them through the bottom. And we'll do the ears real quick. Thank you for whoever pointed that out.
Next question. Is there a reason you prefer 3 strands instead of 2 for lips?
No. Fullness, personal preference. You can absolutely do 2. You can play with it, see what you like. I think because, as you can see, with the straight stitches, they kind of fall in between the cross stitches. When you pull them, again, you don't want to be pulling too tight, but even when you pull them just the normal tension of everything else, they'll sort of, they'll be fluffy, and then as you pull them, they'll sort of lower into the crevice between the cross stitches. So I like that 3 strands just ensures that you still can see the lip floss, even though it kind of gets pulled and tucked down in there. Okay, so now I have the ears. Thank you for whoever mentioned that. And we are going to do, it's a little tricky because we have 2 gentlemen here who have shorter hairstyles. So doing what a lot of Stitch People fans like to call the real hair technique, which is, you know, when you've got, I'll show you on the Stitch People book. So when you've got like a bride like this hair is cross stitched, but sometimes people will like to do satin stitches, straight stitches, what have you, bullion stitches, French knots for curly hair to create more realistic looking hair. So to appeal to that, what I'm going to do for Sherlock's hair is some satin stitch, which is essentially, I'm going to transition to my camera so you can see my arms because I'm a gesturer, look like a sim right now. So when you create a straight stitch, it's just like point A to point B going any direction. It can be any length. It's just a straight stitch somewhere on your pattern. Satin stitches are just basically a series of straight stitches, but they are stitched real close together so that you sort of get this bunching effect. When you put one next to the other, you'll get a real tight silky looking, I guess I could use my fingers for that. It's a satin stitch. If all of my fingers were straight stitches, that's what a satin stitch is. Just a bunch of straight stitches real tight together to fill a space. Think of it, you could sort of think of it like coloring with a crayon or a colored pencil. You have to do each of these long strokes and really, really close together to fill in a coloring page or a chunk of a coloring page. It's the same thing like coloring with floss. So let me transition back to my camera. Now, Sherlock, again, we've just got gentlemen with short hair, but what we're going to do is instead of diagonal stitch, cross stitch, half width cross stitch, we're just going to create long straight stitches that will fill out this hair space. So it'll be a little bit more, oops, I guess I'm covering that. So it'll be a little bit more like this on either side of his face. We could even do that cool classic, you know, the sideburns that kind of come in, that old school look. So I've got DMC 938. I'm going to create about a 4 arms length of floss. Pull that out and cut that. And then separate my 6-strand embroidery floss into 2 groups of 3. And the number of threads or strands of floss you use will depend on the size AIDA fabric you're using. Size 14 AIDA fabric is very standard. It means there are 14 squares of the fabric or 14 potential cross stitches per inch. That's what that number means. So if you're using a size 11 fabric, that means fewer stitches per inch, which means bigger stitches, which means you might want to use 4 threads to fill that space because they're going to be bigger stitches. So you want a little more bulk to fill in the squares. And then likewise, if you're using size 18, that's tinier stitches to squish 18 into an inch. So you might only use 2 threads. So here we go for Sherlock's hair. Up here, we've got coming from the ear. Now I am going to do these 2 diagonal stitches just sort of as a baseline. This is part of the pattern. So I see his hair is designed to come up this way and down this way, but I'm looking at the back so I can feed this loop around my tail. There we go. So this is, I'm doing these diagonals in the pattern. And I just wanted to do that so I have the visual of it so that I can see where I'm going. Now I'm going to just create these long sort of satiny stitches. So my first one spans about 3 vertical rows. And we're working with such tiny spaces that I think I'm only going to be able to get 3 in here, 3 long straight stitches. I'm going to bring this guy up a little bit farther because that diagonal starts to kick in. Now I'm going to just poke between the holes of the AIDA fabric. I don't want to catch any existing floss. I just want it to lay on its own. Same thing up here. I want to create a new hole and I can kind of feed it under that diagonal. There we go. So got some nice thick sideburns there and I'm going to pull
So
that.
how many passes up and down did that take?
That is 3. So there's 3 long stitches laying here all side by side. And now I'm going to fill out, this is all hair as well. So on the pattern, you could stitch that as a long skinny cross stitch like we've done for the ears, or I could continue to satin stitch it, which again is just repeated straight stitches. I'm going to bring my needle up kind of through the floss, but I separated the stitches that I did. So it's coming through, not through the threads, but through the stitches. I hope that makes sense. Oops. I've got a little bunch. What happened here is one of my 3 strands of thread came undone. So 2 got pulled through and 1 did not, and it was just bunching. So if I pull slowly, I can just straighten that out. The ends are a little uneven, as you can see. So if this happens to you, new stitcher, you can just cut off the ends, the uneven ends, and create a nice crispy edge to rethread your needle. Boop. gonna lick the end of that real quick. Thread that up. Okay. And then I'm gonna just do, I think one more might do it from this corner up into that diagonal. And the reason I did those diagonals is so that I could kind of hide my needle. See how I'm feeding my needle underneath that existing diagonal that I did? There we go. So it sort of covers that up, feeds it in real nice. So now I'm going to go over to the other side of the pattern, and I'm going to do the same thing. Do the diagonals. I'll do about 3 stitches, big long satin stitches, and then a couple pickups, if you will, to fill in the blanks.
Robin's asking, can you explain where you're putting the upper stitch when you're putting the satin stitch?
Sure. I think I understand. So I'm just going to anchor this hairline with those diagonals because that's where the hat is. So I just want to make sure that the hat has a crispy diagonal for it. So that's why I'm doing it with the hair so I don't get too carried away. And now for the satin stitches, I'm going to just come down to where it begins. And this first stitch, I'm using 2 holes of the AIDA fabric at the base and at the top. And as I pull that through, I'm just going to use my fingernail to make sure it lays to the side of the ear stitches. Perfect. I'm going to repeat that again on the other side of the stitch. I don't want to go all the way because I do have 2, let's see. Yeah, I do have 2 little half stitches of skin there. So I'm not going to use the whole of the AIDA fabric, but almost. I'm going to go between the holes. And I'm going to push my needle up. So I think this is what Robin was referring to. So as I come to the top here, I'm going to feed the tip of my needle a little bit underneath that existing diagonal. So the top of that stitch is a little bit hidden. Now I'm going to come back down, go right in between those satin stitches that I've done, or straight stitches. And I want this to lay right in the middle of those. So I'm going to go right next to where the previous stitch was. So I'm feeding the tip of my needle underneath the diagonal and pulling that straight. And now I'm just going to kind of comb this satin stitch a little bit with my needle and make sure that all these little skin tone stitches are showing through. So now I'm going to create a couple more stitches right to the top right corner area of this eye. So bring my needle up. I feed the point of my needle sort of down and through the AIDA fabric, going underneath the existing diagonals so that those hair stitches cover it up. I'm going to do one more and just fill in that white space. Same technique. There we go. Now I can tie this off down at the base. So now in our last few minutes, I'm going to load up my needle with 3 strands of DMC 310. That's black, like a very true black color. And I'm going to stitch the eyes really quick because I find this to be very unsettling. I'll do the 2 eyes cross-stitched, and then I will stitch the pipe so that we can learn French knots today. And I think we might have time to do some more French knots next week because they can be tricky for people. So what I'm going to do is stitch the eyes. And now this, I'm going to just think ahead and just talk you through the thoughts in my brain that might be helpful to you. So like I mentioned, looking at the pattern here, I'm going to, uh-oh, did we lose my sound?
There it is.
There we go. Uh-oh, thank you for your patience. So I'm just going to talk you through the thoughts in my head. As I mentioned, I'm going to use DMC 310 for the 2 eyes and the pipe right now. So knowing that those are the 3 elements I'm about to tackle, I'm going to do the right eye first so that I can hop over to the left eye, and then it's just a tiny little jump down to the pipe, as opposed to doing the left eye first and then the right, and then I'd have a big jump down to the pipe. So this is just something to think about that you'll become very familiar with, it'll become kind of second nature, the flow of the order of what to stitch will start to make itself clear to you the more you stitch. But that's the reason I'm starting on the right side, so that I can, you don't, if you wanted to, you could start and stop each stitch and clip your tails in between and whatnot. It's really up to personal preference and the cleanliness of the backside of your portrait and all of that. If I've only got a few stitches and they're only a few squares apart, I generally don't start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. I'll just do my one stitch like this and then jump right on over to do my next stitch. Right eye done, left eye done, almost. I got excited. Okay, and again, making sure your needle is going straight through the holes of the AIDA fabric, sharing that space, not interrupting the space of any stitches that are already there. So the reason I did that little mouth is so we could hop onto the pipe. So I've just got one little diagonal stitch going down from the bottom left corner of the mouth. So I'm going to bring my needle up and do that diagonal.
Recording in progress.
There we go. And then I've essentially got the same thing, though I represented it as a triangle instead of just a line. We'll see if I want to fill that out. Then to the left, I've got a cross stitch. And then above that, you can see a Lizzie special. That's a classic Lizzie move right there of, I don't want a full diagonal. I just want a little baby diagonal. So I make this funky little quarter square. Essentially what I've done is I've got a diagonal that comes up not quite halfway up the line and just creates a real shallow angle. I'm going to go ahead and outline this. It's not indicated in the pattern, but I don't love that I can see all of the corners of my cross stitch there. So I'm just going to quick outline it with some straight stitches. And that is a nice example of some creative liberties you can take. And indeed, right now it's kind of chunky where it's just this big black thing and a stick up to the mouth. So I am going to fill in this white space. A outline should do it from top to bottom.
Hey guys, I do see that it is frozen. I'm hoping that we get Spencer to get it back on track. And while we're waiting, again, just as a reminder, this class is being recorded and will be available on michaels.com/classes, as well as on the Michaels YouTube channel. If need be, I can also put in the links for classes 1 and 2 if you would like. So just let me know in the chat. Just one moment. I'll make sure I put these. As a matter of fact, I'll put both classes 1 and 2 in there for you guys. And here is 1. And put in class 2 for you. And I will go in and make sure I find the link for class number 4. And they will be back on here in just a second here. One moment. Trying to get them back on, but I'm not seeing her name at the moment. And Spencer, if you could unmute yourself and let me know. I will apologize. Please bear with us. We're still trying to get them back on.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me?
I can
Haha.
hear you. I'm
Thank
getting your
goodness.
video
That's not
back
so
on.
bad.
There we
I don't know
go.
what happened. My computer just decided to go kaput, of course. So luckily, we still have plenty of time to go over the French knot. So picking up right where we left off, we have Sherlock Holmes' pipe, which follows the pattern exactly, except I also outlined the big pipe portion of it. And then on the pattern, we can see that the pipe smoke is DMC 645. And if you want to get fancy, one thing I like to do with Stitch People, and I did this in the John Watson little stitch along video that I made on the Stitch People YouTube, I like to combine floss colors. For example, with hair, it makes it a little more multi-dimensional. That's why I did it with John Watson. I threw in one strand of this DMC 729 in addition to, I believe he is 612 for the rest of his hair. So it's 2 strands of 612, 1 strand of 729, gives a little more dimension. So what I'm going to do with the pipe smoke is I'm actually going to use 2 strands of 645, which is the color recommended in the pattern. And then I'm also going to use 1 strand of the DMC 3782, which is this light mocha brown. Oh, that's my skin tone. Light mocha brown color. So that'll add just a little bit of a lighter gray dimension to the smoke. So we'll have 2 dark gray strands, 1 light gray strand, and in the twist of the French knot, that should look pretty cool. So I'm going to cut some lengths of that, take 2 strands of DMC 645. I always envision in a Zoom meeting or online broadcast when the camera goes off or audio or somebody freezes, it reminds me of when I was in elementary school and like the power would go out and the room would go black and there'd always be a handful of kids who just immediately scream for some reason. And it was like, okay, just hold everybody, we'll get it back. Like everything comes to a screeching halt. I don't know why it's the same in my mind. Okay, so I have 2 strands, 645, 1 strand, 3782. And I've just smoothed them out, lined them up side by side to give me my 3 strands of floss that I like to use with my size 14 AIDA fabric. Now, with embroidery stitches in general, whether you're doing straight stitches, if you're doing French knots, what have you, you may not want to use the full 3 strands, or you may want to use more. If you're doing like a big floral embellishment of some kind, you might want it really thick and lush, and you might use 4 or 5 or even 6 strands of floss. For this tiny little French knot, we might want to just use 2 strands of floss because there's like a big French knot and a little French knot. So to begin, the key for, I think one of the key elements of getting a good French knot is making sure your tension at the start is really good. So if you're starting from scratch like we are, as in we've just got floss on a needle, it is not attached to the fabric at all because we haven't been stitching with it yet. What I like to do, and this is just a Lizzieism, I don't know if it's a real thing or not, but I like to pre-secure my floss if I can. So I'm just going to run my needle through the stitches on the back side of my fabric. I'm just going to use the pipe stitches that we just did as my anchor. And I'm just going to loop my floss around those stitches on the back so that it's secured. Look, I can hold up my portrait just from this floss now because I've secured it. So that is one of the things that I think will really help your French knots to not pull through. So looking at my pattern coming out the top of this pipe,
What are the colors?
I've got 2 strands of DMC 645 and 1 strand of DMC 3782. I've just combined those to get my 3 strands of floss. So as indicated on the pattern, I've brought my needle through my fabric and you bring it all the way. And this is where that tension is really helpful. Now, here's the fun bit. I like to hold my floss with my left hand, just hold it tight. Take your needle in your right hand, wrap it around your needle 2 times, and then very carefully, keeping your hands on the needle and on the floss with your left hand, you feed the point of your needle right back through your fabric. You don't want to go in the exact same hole that you came up through because you don't want the knot to be able to pull through to the back side of the fabric. Rather, if you can catch just maybe even 1 thread of AIDA fabric between where you came up and where you're going back down, that'll prevent the knot from pulling through. And as you pull through from the back, you're going to be pulling through with your right hand. Keep your left hand on that embroidery floss. A loop will form. And if you sort of feed that loop down with your finger as you pull with your right hand, then you get a nice tight French knot. Ta-da! How about that? We'll do one more. We can do a few little smokes here. So you bring your needle up all the way. I want to make sure I'm nice and centered for you. So you bring your needle up, make sure you could pull that floss nice and tight. That tension is ideal, and that's why we pre-secured our floss for that first stitch. You take your floss, hold it in your left hand, wrap it around your needle 2 times. If you want a bigger French knot, you could wrap it 3 times. If you want a small, I don't know, I guess I've never wrapped it just the once. For smaller French knots, I like to just use fewer threads of floss. But I'm going to just loop 2 times. Keep your right hand on your needle, your left hand fingers on this floss. And then you put your needle back down in your fabric, very, very close to where you came up, just like micro distance away. And as you pull the needle with your right hand, you keep your left hand around the loop that sort of naturally forms. And then you can very slowly pull that loop through to create a nice French knot. There you go. And what I'm going to do, I'll show you what a smaller French knot looks like. So I'm going to take the floss through the back side. Going to clip that off. And I'm going to switch to this 3782 light mocha brown color. I'm going to use 2 strands of this instead of 3, so you can see what a smaller French knot would look like. And I imagine the smoke, kind of dissipates as it flows away from the pipe. So that's why I'm using the lighter color for a smaller French knot up at the top. Just thinking about a big puff of smoke coming out and dissipating, it's going to look a little bit lighter towards the top. So I've threaded my needle. I'm going to pre-secure my floss. So I'm just going to run my needle and floss through some of the existing stitching on the back side of my portrait a couple of times so that it's nice and tight, so that as I make my French knot, it is not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's a knot pun. I'm hilarious. There we go. I'm going to do one more for good measure because I just don't trust those guys. Okay, there we go. So now, same exact thing. I'm going to bring my needle up where I want the knot to go. Thank you, Spencer. And you pull it taut. Hold that floss with your left hand. Wrap it twice. Feed the needle back through your AIDA fabric, not in the same hole, just very, very close to where you came up. Keep a hold of that floss with your left hand. Pull your needle with your right hand. A loop will form. Keep it around your finger if you can, and just keep it nice and tight. There's sort of a give and take of the tension that happens between your right and left hand. And then you get a nice knot. I'll do one more. You don't have to do as many as I'm doing. I'm just doing a couple extras for instructions so you can all get a hang of it. So I brought my needle back up one more time. I'm holding my floss with my left hand, 2 spins around my needle with my right hand, needle in my right hand. Push the needle down through the fabric very close to where I came up, pulling the needle with my right hand, keeping the floss loop around my left hand, feeding the tension down. And there you have it. Little smoke puffs coming out the pipe in French knot form. I love it. So I'm just going to secure my floss on the back side by running it through like this, clipping it off. And there we have a nice Sherlock face with some satin stitched hair, a nice little free-form pipe, and just a cross stitch and a couple of outlines, and then French knotted smoke coming out the pipe as the detective thinks his thoughts. I'm going to switch back to my camera so that I can say goodbye to you all for today. Thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties, and thank you to Spencer for helping me solve that quickly. Just a reminder, as you work on your Sherlock Holmes and John Watson pattern, we would love to see it. So post it to Facebook, post it to Instagram, use the hashtags, hashtag Stitch People, hashtag Make It With Michaels, and hashtag DMC so we can find you and cheer you on. Sign up for next week's class, stitchpeople.com/week4. And if you need the pattern or any materials, you could go to stitchpeople.com/Michaels for the pattern, for the materials list, all of that. And keep in mind, you can rewatch this video if you want to see some of these techniques again within 24 to 48 hours on michaels.com/classes or just Michael's YouTube channel. And keep an eye on the Stitch People social media because we will also post yet another little bonus stitch along video. What I'm going to do is finish Sherlock. I'm going to finish him up in that bonus video. So we basically did the suit already, similar techniques on John Watson, and the hat is just all cross stitched. And then on top, we do a straight stitch plaid, just like we did straight stitches on the door. So we'll cover that in the stitch along as well. And then next week, we'll talk about the final details of straight stitched archway, lanterns, which will also use satin stitches for the flames, and we'll learn the lazy daisy stitch for the greenery. And then we will be all done, and my heart will break to not see you anymore. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Michaels will send an email with a review.
Oh, Michaels will send an email to you with a review, with a survey, so that you can review the class. We'd love to hear all of your feedback so that we can always continually improve and do better for you in the future. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and connect with us on social so we can see what you're up to. And hopefully we will see you all here at the same time, same place next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.